Oh hi! Welcome back! We're here again. Apologies on the almost nil uploads after the emergency update video. Obviously I wanted to do more and I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna have some smaller videos out while I work on the 10-year project. That didn't happen. That really didn't happen. I made posts, I read these chapters, which by the way, I didn't even have to do the, absolute nuclear option I had. I was just able to read them as they got translated and came out because I was overall so focused with that project that I didn't really check a whole bunch of sites and then see spoilers on my feeds and all that sort of shit. So that was nice. But yeah, I didn't actually manage to get any videos out during that time, which was unfortunate. But we're here now. I'm also going to be focusing on videos throughout this next month or two, and I'm just going to have them all done ahead of time so that I don't have to worry too much when I'm going back to working on that project, right? That works out well. In regards to that, I recommend you all stay till the end. I got two big video announcements that are, well, one of them's decently big, but it's not as big as the other one, where I'm going to have a lot of focus in there and everything. Both are still decently big though. That might sound weird and everything, that might sound like my usual thing, and I don't want to be this mousetrap sort of scenario where it's like, oh, I'm putting cheese in front of you, just go get it, right? But both of those videos will be related to ReZero, one more so than the other. The other's going to have it in there. It sounds odd, it'll make sense when we get there. But anyways, the more important thing is, we're back. We have the shelf again. There it is. I said shelf as if that was the singular. It'd be shelf. I don't know why I made that mistake, but you know what, whatever. Anyways, we're back here. We have even more now. So much so that it's down low to a point that I don't think you could see it unless we move the camera to my waist. But we're back. We even have Medaka box here. I can't read it, but I've already read it, and I love the series. So now it's here in its original language. I really hope Viz or somebody like that picks it up. And the one final thing I'm going to mention, nothing too big really, it's this arm right here. I can't actually show it, mainly just because I don't want to fuck with it too much, so I'm going to let it stay there for now. And in a week or two, if I have a new video recorded by then, and specifically in a week or two if I have that video recorded, meaning if the next two videos are recorded this week as well, I'm probably not going to show it, but I'll show it on screen. Boom. Yeah. That's on this arm now. Maybe I can show a little bit. You might be able to see a little bit of it. But that's all I'm going to show. I don't want to touch it too much or anything like that. Right? I'm being very cautious. This is my first one. I've had to look up a whole bunch of shit. But yeah, that's permanently on there now. And hopefully next year I can get this one done too. Anyways, enough fucking dilly-dallying. Let's just get to the review. Right off the bat, let me just say, this volume is fantastic. I really can't wait to talk about a bunch of this. But as soon as we start, we basically get another filling us in on what's going on type of chapter, except this one's actually really good. Usually these chapters are kind of just simple because they're just, oh, here's what's happening with these characters and everything. Not necessarily bad, it gives us context, it's just, for the most part, they're very simple, so then it's like, okay, we'll wait till the next one and see what happens then. This time though, we get some really interesting info. We learn, thanks to Anastasia and Julius and Hallibel, that essentially this shit was tested, the whole undead type of thing. That was tested in Kararagi, but it was hard to tell who was living and who was dead. It was hard to tell them apart, with the exception of what they needed. So for example, food, water, all that sort of shit. With the exception of that, was overall difficult. So that's a really interesting detail, and that's also kind of horrifying, because it's like, oh shit, unless you can see an oddity in somebody in terms of, how much food they may be going to get, or water, or all this sort of stuff, like, rather the lack of, right? Unless you can notice that, these people can just be around you, and that's kind of scary. And then we also learn that Groovy might just be out of the fight. He might be dead. He might be part of that army. Who knows, right? It's a worrying thing because it's like, well, we haven't heard any reports from him. We haven't even seen him. So we don't know what's going on with him. And then, speaking of generals and all that, Caecilius has beaten and killed Sphinx. Sphinx is dead already. That was really quick. So then Beatrice and Roswaal begin to test how the whole undead work in terms of what's more effective, all this sort of shit. Even Garfield is, getting in there trying to see. And as they get further and further in, Roswaal notices some shit about them and generally gauges the idea of who they're up against. And what do you know? That very person shows up. Sphinx shows up. Undead this time. Which is really fucking cool. I think I mentioned something similar to this with the previous review, or something like that with my notes. But the idea of using a spell to resurrect the dead, but then also using it for yourself, technically speaking, like in that sort of manner, is really damn cool and really damn creative. And then we get a really interesting scenario, because we get a chapter where characters are talking, but this is the chapter where a loop happens. That is really interesting. So, Roswaal and Beatrice, they're fighting Sphinx, or Garfield, or Zelda, all that, right? All of them are fighting Sphinx. They overall beat Sphinx, and then a big attack of light is produced. But in the carriage area, Subaru, Amelia, Ren, all of them, they're having some chats. And I do like one of the things here a whole lot, which is Amelia kind of teasing Subaru and making it very clear that their relationship is getting even closer, right? We saw it with the previous arc. I want to say like around the end of that. I think it was the end of Arc 7 that we saw that with. I don't think it was Arc 8. I believe it was around the end of Arc 7. But now we're seeing it again here, where yeah, these two are getting even closer. I love it. And, as that whole thing's going on and Rem's confused as to everything that's being said and all this sort of shit, boom, there goes the carriage. So we also get a first time again here type of thing, like I mentioned with the previous chapter, where we get a chapter that doesn't start with the loop, but it actually starts with context as to what happened. And fun fact, I'm gonna steal this joke from my notes, but fun fact, did you know that the Boo Saga is my favorite DBZ saga? Did you also know that the Human Extinction Attack is a pretty cool move? I don't know, I just like writing that down in there, because the way they describe Sphinx's attack is really similar to what you see there. So, I enjoyed that a decent bit. But anyways, regarding the loop, I do really like that this loop kinda happens and Subaru goes immediately into action. I don't think this always has to happen like some people believe. Some people think, oh, why doesn't he just always, get right to it with these loops and everything. I think that's a little fucked to think about it that way because of, what he's going through. But I do like that in this circumstance, his immediate thought was, right, let's go, plan. Julius, let's go. Okay, that didn't work? Cool. Amelia, let's go. Alright, and then we get Halle Bell. And then we learn about a few more things within the next chapter, where Groovy's alive and well, is where Heinkel and Rowan are, so that's interesting. We also learn that Garfield was able to gauge something known as like core bugs, essentially, or he was at least able to help out in the gauging of that. And that's pretty interesting, right? The idea that, oh, all of these are essentially centered to a bug. It's not a specific place on the body, but it's a parasite that exists there. That's pretty damn nice. And then we also see Ubilk mention essentially two beings who are going to turn the whole battle around. One of those very clearly, pointing towards Louis. So I will say at first that had me really worried. And I mean, the arc isn't done yet, so we don't know fully what's going to happen there. But then the other one pointed towards the Divine Generals, and the immediate thing I thought of was, well, with the way it mentions Beastman and 9 Pillars and all this, Groovy, it's going to be Louis and Groovy that are the most important here. And then we get a smaller section where we see more of Groovy and all this, where he's at with Heinkel and Rowan, and we actually learn from here that Rowan, his whole scenario, it was weird because it's like, oh, he's Cecilis' dad, but he's never been really mentioned all that much beforehand, and when he was first found in that bar type of area, he just seemed like a nobody. So it's kind of weird that it's like, oh, this sort of thing with him, but now it makes sense because, oh, he was executed by his son, but he's still alive, he's still hanging around, and now there's just an agreement of, okay, we'll remove your charges, and in exchange, you help me out. And then we don't really get too much after that, with the exception of we learn more about Groovy and his affinity towards, curse arts, weapons, all that sort of shit. So then we get some build up towards the message that Flop has for Vincent that Shiza gave him. We also, just to mention it before I mention the big thing here, we get more with Ren in terms of her increasing emotions, I'm gonna say, and all that sort of shit. I really like that Teppei is just kind of pulling at the string here, just little by little, inch by inch, moving her back to the original position. I'm curious of how we might get there, right? I feel like at this point, after everything that's happened, it's going to happen. But then we learn the overall big thing here of Louis. Louis, as to be expected, isn't very trusted by the group. They're allowing her to be there, but they don't really trust her. The only two who are kind of joining Subaru's side here in a way is Emilia and Beatrice. And Beatrice is pretty shocking, but Emilia and Beatrice, for their own reasons of course, but it's an overall viewpoint of if Louis can prove herself to be a better person, then she's a better person, right? It's a matter of proving herself. A lot of the others just don't view her that way. They just view it as, this is a problem that we have on our hands. Those two, as well as Subaru, it's like a kind of thing where they expect her to fully change in some way, and that can properly, validate her existence. And then we get one of the, probably single-handedly, one of the best chapters in the series, in my opinion. Is it biased? Probably. But look at my top, overall the top sections of my tier list. It should be clear there. We get one of the best chapters, because we get the conversation about Louis, regarding, her, Rem, Subaru, and the rest of the group, all this sort of stuff. But mainly it's just those three in the room discussing while Rem and Tenza are also there. And it's the very clear, heartbreaking conversation about who Louis is. And the real heart-wrenching thing is Rem doesn't want to hear it. This pains her. But she already knows. She already knows who Louis is, what Louis done, all this sort of shit. It made sense in her mind, right? It was odd to her that Subaru held this much disgust for her and all this sort of shit. But it came into full realization of, oh, my memories are gone. It's possibly due to that thing. I say thing, that sounds horrible, but you know what I mean. So, that's a real heart-wrenching moment, because she realizes this child she really enjoys and is very kind and all this sort of shit, is also the reason that, you know, she's the way she is. And she starts really breaking down here, saying like, oh, but like, the way she is now, you know, she's fine, and it's just me. I'm just the person who's affected. And we get a really great moment here, where it's not necessarily rude, but it's kind of a harsh thing, a harsh reality that Rem has to face that Subaru brings up to her, of, no, it's not just you. It is multiple people. Multiple people have been affected by her and her siblings. This is not just a you issue. And I love that, as much as that's like, you know, a punch to my favorite character. It is a great moment because it's a wake-up call, right? It's just a wake-up call to, hey, this isn't just about you. This is a problem for everybody, right? And I love that type of shit. I made the shitty Boo Saga joke earlier, but there is a moment with that in the Boo Saga that I really do love, which is the introduction, pretty much, or the prelude to the introduction of my favorite character. I know I have the same favorite character as fucking everybody with that series too, but that scenario I really love, because with that series, Vegeta in that specific moment is acting very stubborn and all this sort of shit, and Goku quite literally tells him, wake up, and mentions everything that's been done, all this sort of shit, what's going to happen if they don't work together, and then they work together, because Vegeta realizes that shit, and from there my favorite character is born. But, you know, we get that really great moment of it's a wake-up call to him, and we get that with Rem here too. But then, oh my god, okay, we get two different callbacks here, and this is like so fucking good. We get two separate callbacks here. Let's start with the first one in terms of chronological order, or at least I believe this is chronological order. Subaru gives Louie a new name. Louie is no longer Louie. As a means to change herself, as a means to become a new person and not, you know, the Sin Archbishop of Gluttony, he gives her a new name. It's fitting because it's a star one, but it's also fitting because of who's involved in this scenario. He calls her Spica. Some of you might not be familiar with that. I feel like if you're at this point with the volumes, you probably will be, but if you're not, that's okay. Let me fill you in a little bit. That name's from the Slothif, the one where Subaru and Rem get together. That's from that. And in case you're curious on where that name's in there, that's the name of their daughter. They took a name, Teppei took the name from that, which yes, of course, still is related to the stars, but he took the name from that and gave it to Louie. Not only that, he referenced From Zero in here. And you get this big ol' hug with, like, Spica, we're gonna say Spica now, Spica and Rem and all this sort of shit, and it's so fucking beautiful. This is genuinely one of the best chapters, and depending on what Spica does from here, she really might beat out Wilhelm. I know some people think me putting her that high is like a little weird. I don't know. I've really enjoyed her growth from a villain to what she was with Arc 7, and now this. I'm at a point where I am just ready to put this character in my top 10. I love this character. This character is fantastic. I'm worried if this character dies. So then we get a really great chapter about Otto, and generally he's not taking certain things that were said from Julius super well, as well as stuff that Julius then goes on to say, as well as what Roswell tries to do regarding, you know, his own plans and stuff like that. But we also get a great moment here that I like a lot that's kind of smaller in this chapter because it's mainly an auto-focused chapter, where when Spica is mentioned, right, with this whole thing with Spica, and it's like, oh, this is Spica, right, this is the new person here. It's not really treated as Spica, cool, all is forgiven, you know, like, oh, this is our new friend, part of our team, and all this sort of shit. Everybody is still cautious. You know, Rem's still being attentive with her. Tanza isn't fully sure if she sees this as the right thing to do and all that sort of shit, right? This is still a Sin Archbishop they're dealing with, right? They don't ignore that, and I like that a lot. Some series would possibly ignore that, and as much as it could be like a cutesy little moment, you still have to consider who the person involved is, right? Like, it doesn't really work like that. So I like that here, where it's just like, okay, she's changed her name, right? Or rather, you've changed her name, and she might be better from here, right? But she has to prove herself. Because if not, she's just still the Sin Archbishop with a different name. So I like that a lot. So then we get even more EX novel connections. We're getting a lot of EX novel connections within this arc and also arc 7, but like a lot within this arc, where we finally receive, you know, the message that Shiza had for Vincent regarding the whole thing, the strategy of what to do, but also there's the thing with Flop and how he'd like to know, as well as Medium, would like to know what happened to their sworn brothers, you know, Miles and Balroy. And this is something interesting. I'm a little bit dumb, and I didn't realize when I was reading EX1 that was Miles in there. I somehow failed to consider that the person in EX1 looked really similar to the person I saw in EX5. I don't know how I missed that. And Balroy's whole thing, with like his scenario of being a traitor and all that, his goal was mainly like not to, you know, betray the Wallachia like empire, all this sort of shit. It was more so aimed at Lagunica in a way. Not necessarily that, but more so getting revenge for the person who, you know, killed his brother. Which is funny, because his, you know, aim was like, oh, Julius, Reinhardt, like all of those three, which I guess one of them was Felix. I mean, that's kind of close. You're kind of close. You just got to go a little bit above that branch, and you found them. But yeah, like, it's a little bit of a funny scenario to think about now. Of, man, he couldn't even focus on the actual like target. Like the target wasn't there, right? It's also interesting because this leads into a direction of, oh shit, so he was getting revenge for his brother, then he died, then Madeline showed up, and Madeline's now trying to get revenge for him. So Madeline's gonna fight Julius, and that's gonna be justified. So that's really damn interesting. And we also get the final tidbit here, where Medium will likely become one of the many future wives of Vincent to then, you know, have the next child for the Empire. That should be pretty interesting. Also, a little bit of a side note here, but think about the EX1 thing more, is now making me realize how funny that would be if Balroy's like, oh yeah, you know, I'm gonna go get my revenge now, like now that I'm back from the dead. And it's just like, cool, so your opponent is very crippled in terms of their brain. Their body is also very crippled. They're basically bedridden. Go get them. So now we have a whole bunch of shit going on. There's a three-headed dragon that was from, I don't necessarily want to say EX2, because it wasn't really EX2, but it was in relation to that. The whole scenario with Wilhelm and all that, and the previous Wallachian Empire leader, all that sort of shit, you know, Stride, all that. That whole scenario is where, from what I understand, the three-headed dragon comes from. I haven't actually read that yet, like that little description type of stuff, but I do have a general idea of what happens there, and I believe that appears. But we also have the prune corpse from, you know, EX5 that Lamia had, and speaking of her, she is here now on the battlefield, multiple of her, and she's fighting Gauze, which had me really worried about Gauze. And honestly, for a moment, I was like, oh, well, you know what? It'll be A-okay, because I know somebody's going to show up, and they'll fight Lamia. Well, I got proven wrong in an interesting way. Then we get another fantastic chapter. Not as good as the, you know, whole Spica type of one. But in relation, technically, we get the continuation of Lamia's battles, and she's fighting Gauze, kicking Gauze's ass, fighting Garfield, kind of kicking Garfield's ass. Garfield transforms, and then that battle reaches an interesting point. But overall, there's a lot of problems here involving Lamia, and one of the biggest problems being because of the brother she used in EX5 that she's once using again, here, like his whole ability. This creates a scenario where she knows where all the important individuals are, but also specifically Vincent. So she goes right to Vincent because, cut him down. Not only do you win, but you cut down the Emperor. That's pretty big, right? It means you won. So, goes right to him, and she really gets upset, right? She gets absolutely, pissed at him. A little bit before that, I believe, we get a moment with Berset's kind of just, turning into a meteor, like a human meteor, and just crashing into one of the Lamias. I don't think it's specifically the one that's there. At least with the way it was written out, it didn't feel like it was the one that's there. But he kind of just does that to one of them that's, I believe, in the carriage area. So there that one goes. And Berset's, I assumed, was going to be dead, but from the general information gathered on the next chapter, he's still alive, he was saved. I think possibly by Frederica, because I mentioned somebody with golden fur. So I'm going to say Frederica, which is great, because honestly, if it is her, I'm glad. She gets to at least do stuff. I wish she did more. I really wish she would get more than just the weird, kind of gross client stuff, and just give her proper story moments past Arc 4 at least, right? Especially because, technically speaking, outside of the web novel, the web novel and the anime versions kind of just give her less in terms of Arc 4. We really just need to give her more overall. But anyways, Lamia gets absolutely pissed and tries to strike down Vincent, and then Subaru and Spica show up. And I was like, man, what are they gonna do here, right? How's this gonna work? And then I understood the strategy. Subaru says her name out loud, full name, and Louis goes... I'm trying to conjure up how you would say this correctly in her type of speaking manner. It would be like, ow-e, or something like that. And that roughly translates to let's eat. They use the authority of gluttony to take her name. And the rest of the Lamias are now just fucked. They are motionless. That's it, right? She's still okay. And from what I can tell, she's not necessarily, out of everybody's minds, but it's still generally affecting her in some way. And this actually new ability gets renamed to Star Eating, which I like a lot. But then Balroy comes in to save her, and they just piss off out of there, right? I'm not necessarily surprised that this fight isn't going to continue here, because this seems like a pretty damn big fight for the arc, and this will presumably be one of the last battles. But it's kind of saddening that, the last chapter here, they're just out. That's it. Peace. But, yeah. Then Lamia returns to the, Crystal Palace, and we get a really interesting scenario here. I'm so confused, but I'm so intrigued as to what's going on. So Lamia's by the dungeon area of the Crystal Palace, and chained up is Priscilla. That is something I wasn't expecting. I thought Priscilla was going to come in and fight Lamia, right? I thought the implication was going to be, oh, these two are going to fight, and unlike EX5, we're not going to cut away. We're going to get a proper fight this time. We still might later. Priscilla's chained up right now, though, which has me really curious. Because the last time we saw her, she was fighting Arakia with her mother. And they won, presumably. They landed a devastating blow against her. While we didn't see the, sections in between that, it has me really curious on, okay, how did Priscilla lose? How did she get chained up? Where is Yorna? All this sort of shit, right? There's a lot that's happening just in that moment alone from seeing her locked up there. That's like, wait, hold on, okay. That's a lot to digest, because that implies a lot of things, and there's all sorts of scenarios that could have played out, and that is really intriguing. We also learn here, because Balroy speaks to her, the undead kind of come back because they're not satisfied and have grudges towards people, right? So Balroy, he still wants to get revenge, right? That sort of thing. Like there's revenge sort of stuff related there, or wanting to kill somebody who might have killed you. There's other people who didn't come back because they were satisfied with their lives, which is pretty damn interesting. Overall, that's all we get out of this chapter. We get more Hallibell by the end, which is kind of weird, because it just ends with him defeating the dragon, and then, you know, running back to like where the carriages are. We're trying to follow like back to the carriages. It's a little odd, because it's like, oh, that's it. Okay, a little bit of a weird place to end it on, but at least the Priscilla stuff leaves enough intrigue as to, you know, what the fuck is going to happen next, right? Or what are we going to learn about with her, right? At least there's something there. And overall, that's it. That's the volume. This was a fantastic volume. Arc 8 is really shaping out to be super damn good. And I know this was going to be Arc 7, you know, like the later parts of it, all that sort of shit originally. It definitely would have improved Arc 7. If this was in there, if this managed to be in there, this would have been better than the third arc for me. But as it is right now, right? I mean, if we were to view it as Arc 7 as a whole, right? Just Arc 7 Part 1 and Arc 7 Part 2. If we viewed it that way, this would be better than the third arc for me. If we separate Arc 8 from it, right? It's no longer Part 1, Part 2. It's just Arc 7, Arc 8. Arc 8 right now is shaping up to be possibly better than Arc 5 for me. That is really damn good. That means it's going to be my new second favorite. This is a very good arc so far. It's a matter of what happens next, how stuff's handled and everything, but this is fantastic. I especially love the EX novel stuff. The fact that all this information presented to us from the EX novels is finally coming into play is awesome. And this is for an arc that wasn't necessarily fully planned out, but I can see why it was added in, because it would make a lot of sense to just have in there, right? This works out really damn well. I am absolutely loving the shit out of this arc, and I'm very curious to see where we go from here. But overall, that's it for now. Now, I mentioned that thing at the start about the 2 videos. Let me go a little bit more into that. So, the next 2 videos on the channel are going to be ReZero related somewhat. I have one coming out kind of soon, should be soon. I'm probably going to record it this week, and it should be up next week. But that one is going to be talking about a topic that, man, with how much I'm going to criticize this shit, some people are going to think I hate this series, but overall it's going to be me critiquing something that involves the series. In terms of the, I'm going to say marketing area. Not specifically the general marketing type of thing, but something in there. I'm going to look a little bit further into that, discuss certain things, all that sort of shit. The other one is related to ReZero, and it's related to a lot of series. There's just a lot of stuff we're going to be talking about with that, and I think overall it should be an interesting video, even if you don't know everything in there. You might learn a thing or two about like some of the stuff in there. It might be interesting, right? Overall, that's something I also want to, you know, work on and have in there. That one might take more time, because that's going to be a proper big video. This is technically a reworked version of the video I plan to do with the whole cut content thing that I mentioned a while back, and I mean that might still happen in some way. I might look into a general idea if I can find enough regarding that, right, in certain other series. It's just a matter of right now there isn't a whole lot, so if I can find more and certain other things, that might work out well, right? But as for right now, something similar to that is going to be produced soon, and I'm excited to talk about that. That is also going to be something where I, you know, critique, but sometimes when you love something enough, you tend to critique it. That's just what happens. It's a general thing of, you love something a lot, so therefore you gotta also find some of the flaws in there, maybe point it out a little bit, see where you'd like things to improve, and if they improve, that just makes it all the better. Anyways, apologies for the wait on videos and all that, peeps. I'm definitely gonna do more, right? We got more on the way. I'm gonna have those 2 videos, working on and out and all that sort of shit. The next Get Into is gonna be worked on. I'm at least, bare minimum, I'm getting that script done of the next Get Into. As for recording and everything, I'll try my best, right? That one we can be a little bit more lenient because that one requires time, and as a result, I can work on the 10-year project in the meantime while I am working on that. So that works out. Bare minimum, I'm getting that script done of it, though. With that said, thank you all for watching. Have a great night, peeps, and I'll see you all with the next video. Farewell.